You shared with us that you used to stay in your friend's apartment in the building that was just taken down by the Israeli military today. That was the building that had several international media outlets operating from. And so before we get to some more contextual information for the audience about what's happening right now, can you just comment on that?
I'm sorry, I'm just in the middle of, communicating with my paper, so I was a bit confused now. The building was, the Israeli military claims that they are hitting Hamas targets, and that Hamas targets are inside among Palestinian population, civilian population, and that's why the fault is with Hamas. But about this building, which hosts many offices of lawyers and clinics, of doctors, and some apartments. I don't know if it's true or not true, but the claim that Hamas are among civilian population ignores totally the fact that all Israeli military establishments are within Israeli or Palestinian civilian population. The largest military basis here in the West Bank is 1 kilometer away from my house here in Ramallah. You have secret apartments of the Israeli Shabak, Israeli civil secret services, which are placed in normal Israeli residential buildings. So when Israel bombs all these areas in all these buildings, all these apartments in the Gaza Strip, claiming that Hamas are Hamas facilities are among Palestinian population, civilian population, Israel opens the door to anybody else coming in the future and hitting almost any neighborhood in Israel. Because in any neighborhood, you will find military people. In any neighborhood, you will find soldiers who came back from the military, from their unit, and have their weapons. So this insecurity that Israel is inflicting now on every person among 2 million people in Gaza could fire back in the future, because there is no inch in Israel without a military presence among Israeli civilian population.
Many of the people here in the United States have been obviously horrified by the images that they've been witnessing on the news. The buildings being bombed. The little girl today saying, I'm only 10. Like, this isn't fair. What needs to happen for this kind of aggression and violence to end?
I guess, it's what has to happen is international pressure, and from yesterday and the day before yesterday, and from 10 years ago and from 20 years ago. This is what has to happen.
Yeah.
Just to give the audience some updates on how the conflict has unfortunately gotten even more brutal. Oftentimes the way that it's presented to a U.S. audience is as if both sides are on equal footing. You hear a lot about how Israel has the right to defend itself, as if, the rockets and the more recent conflict was started by the Palestinians or started by Hamas, when the fact of the matter is actually very much the opposite, right? So the current conflict that's taking place today, can you give the audience some contextual information about how we got here? Because simply saying Israel has the right to defend itself makes it appear as though Hamas was the agitator here, the aggressor here, but the facts on the ground are very different from that narrative.
Yeah, that's true. Indeed, if we start to roll back, we would never know where to stop unless we reach 1948 or or the beginning of the 20th century. But of course, we don't want to go that far. But let's start with the month of Ramadan, the Muslim fast month of fasting that started a month ago, more than 4 weeks ago. And almost since the beginning, and this is a month where it's a strange month that combines piety and introspection with fasting, and then with the breaking of the fast, some family gatherings and even festivities, and a feeling of togetherness and some relaxation from the woes of this world. So from the start of this month, the Israeli police decided to close the main entrance to one of the old cities entrances in Jerusalem, to block it, not the entry itself, but not to allow the young people who used to sit on the stairs of this entrance, of this kind of esplanade of this entrance. A very petty thing, you would say. But this really annoyed the youngsters, this youth, which started to protest, and then clashes evolved with the Israeli police. A lot of brutality that completely shut down the life in the middle of the Palestinian city of Jerusalem. And at the same time, the fate of a nearby Palestinian neighborhood was nearing some kind of a decisive moment. This is the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, where Israel is trying to evict, or has already evicted, several families from there, claiming that the land is Jewish land from the 19th century. And that's why the Palestinian tenants of this neighborhood, who own houses that were built for them in 1956, they have to leave their houses. And Israeli judges ruled in favor of the Jewish companies that claim that they own the land. Now, even if they do, the land, even if they do own the land, the people have been living there for 65 years, and the people are refugees from 1948. They own land and houses inside Israel, but they are not allowed to go back to their own houses and land. So somehow the combination of these two issues attracted attention more than before, both of Jerusalemites and of other Palestinians. And on top of all of this all, during the last 10 days of the Ramadan, the Israeli police broke in brutally into the esplanade of Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third important and sacred site for Muslims all over the world. And the brutal scenes, the scenes of this brutality of Israeli police invading and desecrating the holy place, also invoked the anger of so many people. And then you could feel the solidarity among Palestinians that it's not always easy to achieve. Palestinians have so many reasons to start uprisings, to start a popular uprising, and we never know why it is being delayed. But then there is a moment when you have a straw which breaks the camel's back, or then you have another straw, and which is even a bit heavier than the former straw. And this is what happened at the beginning of this week. At the same time, there was what Israel celebrates as Jerusalem Day, the day when East Jerusalem was occupied by Israeli military in 1967. So Israel and right-wing religious messianic Israelis celebrate this day by marching into the streets of the old city, Jerusalem's old city, which is an utter provocation. It seems that Israeli intelligence recommended that the day of Jerusalem, of the occupation of Jerusalem, would not be celebrated, but the political echelons didn't listen to the Israeli intelligence. So on that day, on Monday, the three straws, you would say, or four straws, really broke the camel's back. The Sheikh Jarrah, Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa, and actually three straws. So all these three straws broke the camel's back. And Hamas indeed wanted to say, we are here, we care for Jerusalem. And they launched an attack, the first attack, towards Jerusalem, an attack of missiles. So we could say all kinds of things about military attacks, and I'm not a fan of them. But it was a way of Hamas to say, hey, don't disconnect us. We are not disconnected from what happens in Jerusalem, both to its city, its residents, and to the holy place for Islam, Al-Aqsa. And that's how this round of a conflict started.
I want to ask about the reaction to the latest round of violence in Israel itself among Israeli Jews. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of political instability in Israel as of late. Like, I think there's been 4 parliamentary elections in the last year, but at the same time, so Netanyahu is kind of like struggling to maintain power, but at the same time, his main political rival Benny Gantz seems to be fully supportive of all this as well. What is the reaction like inside of Israel?
As I read and listen to Israeli commentators, quite a few analyze the present escalation as a way for Netanyahu and his associates to maintain their rule. Imagine. So it means that they could have taken steps early enough in order to prevent this bloody escalation from happening. We are talking about, I think, about 139 Palestinians who have been killed in less than a week, 39 of whom are children, and around 22 women. So, and I'm not talking about older people and young people who I'm sure have nothing to do with the Hamas military wing. So even Israeli mainstream commentators analyze this escalation as a way for Netanyahu to hold to his rule, because he lost his mandate. The mandate to create a government was given last 2 weeks ago. To his rival Yair Lapid. So this is a way for him to maintain his control over the Israeli government. This is what is said in the Israeli mainstream media. At the same time, of course, the Palestinian, the Hamas and Islamic Jihad missiles have, or rockets, have killed 10 Israelis so far in the last week, and have caused some damage to infrastructure, and mostly instilled so much fear among Israelis, because the alarm sirens are really frightening. I mean, I think sometimes it's more frightening than the fall itself of a missile or of a rocket. So Hamas have managed to create such a balance of fear, not a balance in the damage and in human casualties, but in fear. So parallel to all this, clashes between Palestinians who are Israeli citizens and Jews in Israel, Jewish Israelis have started all over all over Israel. And you see here demonstrations of Palestinians who are Israeli citizens, where the anger about 73 years of discrimination and violence, bureaucratic violence, deprivation them of their land, not to mention the history of their history of being people driven out of this land. So all this culminated in a series of demonstrations and clashes all over Israel, in Palestinian cities and villages and neighborhoods in Israel. This is quite impressive. I mean, some of the sites of vandalism and some lynches that, by the way, were on both sides, it's not a pleasant sight, but at the same time, it is a people in all of historical Palestine, between the river to the sea. It's a people which stands up against 70 years of deprivation, of oppression, of settler colonialism. And this is very impressive.
You know, you mentioned the sirens and how Israeli citizens legitimately feel fear. And I'm curious if the Israeli people are aware of the multiple attempts to engage in a ceasefire. So the Associated Press reports that Israel turned down an Egyptian proposal for a one-year truce that Hamas rulers had accepted. An Egyptian official said Friday, on condition of anonymity, to discuss the negotiation. So Benjamin Netanyahu has turned down calls for a ceasefire. And I'm curious if that information actually gets to the Israeli people, who seem to be terrified about, what's happening right now.
It does get to them. It does reach the Israeli. I mean, I've seen several such reports in Hebrew. I don't know how much people consume this information and how much they let it seep in. But yes, it is available. This information is available.
And are they okay with the fact that Netanyahu has rejected a ceasefire?
It seems yes. Military attacks have the tendency to evoke more nationalistic internal solidarity and standing behind your government. It's true not only about Israelis. I think it's true about other places as well, and especially because they feel that they still can inflict much more harm and damage and casualties to the Palestinian side. And the atmosphere of revenge among Israelis, and many Israelis, I think, is very strong. I mean, to talk now about that the solution can only be political, and we have to address the history in its entirety, and not just the last 10 days or last 1 month. is a very difficult request to propose to the average Israeli today.
And what are some of those potential political solutions? I mean, with the increased settlements in the last several years, a two-state solution seems, impossible. A one-state solution seems intolerable for Israelis. What are some of the potential political solutions?
I didn't go as far as talking about this kind of solution, but any solution is a phase in life, and no solution is final. Excuse me for this combination of two words. So no, I didn't think about that, going that far. But the Israeli, I saw that you wrote as the headline for this interview that we are going to talk about Israeli apartheid. And I thought that a more accurate description would be talking about Israeli settler colonialism. Because apartheid is actually the kind of a phase within, or a kind of a final or almost final phase of settler colonialism, both here and in other places, of course. And settler colonialism is an ongoing, right now it's still an ongoing process, and it is done most radically and with a lot of enthusiasm on the part of certain Israelis and Israeli authorities now in the West Bank. So when I talk about political, I mean that right now what has to be stopped is this process of settler colonialism. And again, this is where international political intervention is so important and so needed. I'm not talking about this, distant solutions. I'm talking about political interventions now that to make Israelis understand that the settler colonial process going on in present everywhere in the West Bank has completely usurped and occupied and conquered the mentality of all Israelis in Israel itself. Of course, Israel is a product of a settler colonial movement, but it came to some kind of a relative halt, which has to be, of course, addressed. But right now there is a danger of those groups in the West Bank that are promoting the takeover of most of the Palestinian land in the West Bank. They don't only want this; they want to repeat the Nakba. They want to repeat the expulsion of 1948, and they are advocating for the expulsion of Palestinians from this country. So a political solution now would be indeed to see this issue, and to understand the danger that they pose, and that in a way Hamas, with its militarization, tells us that there are forces here in both in this country and in the region who will not allow Israel to continue the settler colonial process the way too many Israeli Jews are engaged in.
One final question for you. You mentioned the importance of political pressure as at least a short-term solution. And so, my mind started racing with the possibilities, and really there are few. In the United States, we have the Biden administration, which didn't even acknowledge what was done to the Palestinian, citizens in Sheikh Jarrah. But he did mention repeatedly that Israel has the right to defend itself. I think about the International Criminal Court, which is, of course, considering, prosecuting the government of Israel for war crimes. Israel doesn't even recognize the legitimacy of the ICC. So, I know it's difficult because I can't really think of any possible political solutions in the short term. Is there anything that comes to mind for you?
Look, I was watching this afternoon the Al Jazeera channel, the live streaming, and they brought footage and films from different capitals in the world where thousands of people were demonstrating against Israeli aggression. I hope that this, I mean, you know, it always happens when Gaza is being attacked. And it's not enough, because after this military violence, when it ends, the military violence, which is so clear, remains what I call the institutionalized and bureaucratic violence that characterizes Israel rule over the Palestinians. So one would hope that those thousands of demonstrators understand the connection between the military violence and the bureaucratic and institutionalized violence. In each such demonstration, there are more people there is more pressure exerted on those capitals. Right now, look, I don't like to prophesize or to give advice. I think it's for activists to work out together. But I think from what I read also about the reactions in the United States, I think that more people are understand the danger that Israel poses in its current policy. Danger not only to Palestinians, but to to the security and the safety of this region, and even beyond this region. And all we have to do is to continue the political messages and political recruitment and political consciousness raising. It's not up to me to say how, but I can give the information and the analysis of what is happening. But it's up for you, I think, and for activists to listen to it, to think of more ways to reach out and to show that the danger is to an entire, I mean, the danger is of making this place into a site of religious war. Not a political war, not a political conflict, not a conflict that, you know, was in New Zealand between and Australia and others, between the conquerors, white conquerors, and indigenous people, but a religious war. And this is, we all know that this can be much more, this can be really fatal to the safety of the world.
Amira Hass, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We truly appreciate it, and please stay safe.
Thank you. I'm safe, yeah.